Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to use the debugger tool inside Eclipse so we can better understand what we're doing inside Java and how to actually use debugging in as an effective tool. So as you can see right here, I'm inside my project right now. I'm inside my working with arrays project. That's what we're going to be working with, and we're going to be using the process of debug. Why do we want to use debug is the first question we want to make sure we answer. And so debug we use when we want to figure out why something's performing in a way that we don't expect it to as a programmer, or we see that we're getting incorrect information, like we have a logic error, or we're actually crashing. We want to find out why that crash is happening. And so we use debug, and we can't simply just trace through it. So we can always just read through our code using our eyes and using our finger right here to follow along through the lines of code and tracing through it just in our head itself. However, sometimes tracing through it, we get a little lost, sometimes we get confused, maybe we don't exactly understand what that individual line of code means. And so that's where debug really comes into play, because we can understand what's going to happen with that, and we can figure out that and solve what's going on by looking deeper at the code and using what the compiler and what the editor can tell us about what's going on to make that happen. So we're going to go ahead and actually go over the debug process here in Eclipse. Now, if you have a different IDE, of course the process will be slightly different, but the concepts are still the same. And so take a look at this. You can use this hopefully to help you do more with that and understand as we go from there. We're inside my project. I did one of my other videos on how we could, the importance of not destroying parameters, because we have right here my invalid update ducks array with a debug duck array named source. And then I reassign that a new debug duck array, which invalidates their previous reference to the array of debug ducks we're using inside the project, and then creates a new one temporarily just as a local variable for this method. And you want to make sure we understood that. So we're going to put a debug, we're going to put a breakpoint on here so we can see that. We'll also put breakpoints at a couple other spots to make sure we can see what's going on inside the code and how to work that. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the actual start of the program up here. As always, we always start in my start method. My start method is called from my runner explicitly, so that's where the flow of control happens. So I have my controller, I initialize it with the constructor call. I then call the app.start, so I get out of my runner. And I go into here, and as you can see, I have in my controller, I have my constructor, I have my new debug duck array. It's a debug duck array of 20. I load my pop-up class, and then I call my load ducks method. And so my load ducks method is where I put my first breakpoint. So let's go ahead and scroll down there to take a look at that really fast. You can see I have a breakpoint over here in load ducks right here on line 58. It's indicated by the dot to the left of the line number. I can add or remove a breakpoint by going up here and double clicking on the line number, and it'll make that breakpoint show up. I also have a breakpoint down here at the line 75 at the end of that method, so we can see what's happening with that. And as I said, we're going to go back to where we had the breakpoint for the earlier thing right here, where we talk about that for just the invalid duck array method, so we can see about what's going on. We're seeing that logic error, again, to see why it's important not to destroy a parameter when you're working with data inside Java. So we'll take a look at that as well. So I've got those breakpoints inserted. Again, all I have to do is double click on the line number itself. It puts a breakpoint right there on the screen. It's indicated by that cute little dot next to it. And so once I've got that breakpoint done, instead of doing my normal play button here right here to start the program, I initiate the debug process by clicking the debug runner. It's the cute little bug icon up here, and that'll switch perspectives to the debug perspective. I'll go ahead and click that and get started. So the first thing you'll notice, if this is the first time you've done this, it'll say it's confirming the perspective switch. It wants you to know, the programmer, that when we're working with this, we're changing the way we look at our code. And so that change perspective. Now you could put a checkbox here and remember my decision. I don't, because again, when I'm working with my students, I always want them to realize that, oh yes, I'm forcibly changing how I'm looking at my code, because it makes me have a nice mental change in my head, and so I can use that. You can also use this to help talk to your duck. You're talking to your debug duck to make sure, oh yeah, this is how I can talk to this, and I can show them what I'm doing. Again, using your debug duck to help remind things, always a great thing. So we'll go ahead and we'll switch the perspective by hitting switch. And we have our new perspective. Let's go ahead and go over the actual perspective itself first before we actually go through and step into the debug process so we can identify what's happening. So let's identify the components. We have our console down here. The console window, for purposes of this class, not going to be used for this video, so I'm just going to minimize it, get it out of the way. But if you're using a console-based application, the console is a great spot to keep open. Since I'm using pop-ups, that won't be very helpful for me. So I'm going to minimize that, get it out of the way. Over here on the left, we have the stack trace. This demonstrates where we are inside our code. You can see the actual stack of information has this cute little stack icon over here. So I was in runner at line 7, which sent me to the controller initialization, the constructor at line 16, which then sends me to the load ducks method right here at line 58. So the constructor call sent me to line 58 to do this for initialization. So that says where I'm at. And I can see that right here inside my stack trace as to where I'm going. My standard editor window is still right here. I have access to that the entire time. And it gives me a nice little highlight right here as to where I am at currently, that cute little highlight right here, that dark line for me right now. And again, I've got my breakpoint with the check marks on it saying, hey, that's where I am. I have my breakpoints window up here, which says all the breakpoints, but I usually don't use that. What I really want to break your attention to is the variables window. The variables window is really, really helpful. This is where I can see the values of what we're working with specifically inside my project right now. At the very top, we usually have the this object, which is the current object we're working with. And as you can see right here, I have an array of demo ducks. It's an array of 20. And right now it's filled with null because I haven't done anything with it. Wonderful stuff. And so you can see right here, I have 20 values from 0 to 19, all with null inside them. A pop-up object, and it has its hash code right there. Not very helpful, but that's okay. So I'm going to go up here to demo ducks, and we can see we have nulls inside that because I haven't done anything yet. And so I have that breakpoint, which has paused me right here at the line 58, and it's waiting for me to do something. And so now that I've actually in debug, I activates the debug commands menu section right here up in this top left section. And so we have a couple different buttons we can work with. We have the play pause button, actually the resume button, but play pause because it looks like it's combined. We have the actual pause button. I never use it. It's not really that helpful. The stop button means, oh, I'm done. I'm going to stop looking at this. It's a good time to go back over here to the Java perspective and get back into regular editing mode. Okay. We have the disconnect button. I never use it. That's like if I'm in debug mode, I want to disconnect it. I'm going to stop. I'm going to go back into code and come back into it. So I don't disconnect ever. But the really important ones right here, these three right here, the step into, the step over, and the step return. These are the actual debug commands where we actually do the looking at code inside debug so we can see what's happening with it. And so we're going to start off with the step over one, which is the one that goes over the little blue line. It has that cute little thing right there. And so if I click the step over button, I'm going to step over this and it's going to create the current line I'm on and then wait for me to proceed. So step over, it does that line and waits. And now I have an array right here named titles. It's a string array of length 5. Its ID number is 26. And if I click on it, boom, there's all my values. So I have Mix, Ms, Miss, Mrs, and Mr. right there inside my string array titles for my debug ducks. I'll do the same thing for my next one for string array names. I can even step into this, go into that, and it just does the same thing because it's a single line statement. So I have names, it's an array, and it has all the names of all my ducks right here. And so I have that right there. I then have a block right here, my for loop, where I'm going to go into the loop, and I want to use the step into because I want to step into the actual loop or step into that block of code or step into that method. And so step into is really helpful when you want to go into and look at examine something that's a block of code. And with step into, you only want to use it on your code. Don't use it on code that belongs to Java or some API over here. We're not looking at their code. We want to look at our code itself. So stepping into is specifically for the code we write because we want to go into that block of code. If you go to step into too deep, especially if you're looking, say, for example, like the array list code or the Java Swing GUI code, it's like, oh, you're not going to know what's going on because it's not actually giving you access to the code. It's giving you the .class file. And you can't make any changes to it. You can't realize why it's not working. So step into is for code that you work on yourself. So we'll step into this by using the step into method. And the step into command brings us into that lovely array. And now that I'm in that array, I have my index variables here at 0. And so I have my next one right here is my int random index. I'm going to get a random number from that times titles.length. I'll step over that. Boom. Random index this time is 2. I'll step over again to get a random duck name from that. And my random duck name happens to be, my duck name starts off with miss as the title and then a space, because again, I want to have a space with that. And then I'm going to get the duck name out of that by doing duck names and get that one on that. So I have Miss Splash is the name of my current duck, and you can see that highlighted change right here in my variables window. So whichever color scheme you have, that color will be different for that. But that highlight will draw your attention. Oh, that one was changed specifically. And so duck name right here is Miss Splash. And so I have my random index right here. I'm going to create, I'm at the spot line 66, so I've got that value right here. So my random index, I'm now going to take a new random number, and I'm going to take it by titles.length and names.length to get those two numbers to get a new value for that. And I'm going to use that to actually calculate how many questions I want to ask, because that's what I'm going to do for that duck. So I step over that line. And now my random index is up to 20, so I'm going to assign 20 questions to Miss Splash. And so right here, I have a debug duck current duck is the line I'm on, like 68. And I'm going to create a new debug duck object right here named current duck and pass it that duck name as a parameter. So I step over that line right here, or I can actually step into it. It'll take me into my debug duck code because I wrote that. So I'll use step into. It'll move us to this other class. Oh, I'm in my debug duck class now. And notice how this is now talking about the debug duck. And so my debug duck with string name, I'll assign the name to name. My default questions goes to 0. And my questions is now an array list. So I'm going to step over this. Vloop, vloop, vloop. I initialize all my data members that belong to that. And I step return will take me back to who called me from that. So that's that next button right here. So it takes me back to who called me. And that takes me back to line 68. That's where I was called from. Then I step over because I'm done with that line. And now I have a current duck. It's a debug duck. Inside that current duck, I've got answered questions 0. My name is Miss Splash, and my array list is an empty array list of questions. Oh, wonderful stuff. So now I've got that step over right here. And so I have that int count as 0, count as less than random index, which is currently 20. And I'm going to go for each of those and ask it a question. And so I have a get question method right here, which randomly gets a question using a the split on that string, passing it the \\\? So it's like, oh, every time I get a question mark space on a new string array, so I can get a random string out of that list of strings. And I'm going to go ahead and step over that because I don't want to go through that information. So I'm just going to step over that, step over. And once I've stepped over that, it takes me here to this next breakpoint, the get question, where I'm writing right here. And my string array index is questions.split, passing to that \\\? So right now, questions is a string. I'm going to take the step over on that. And boom, my string array index is all those questions done as an array. Oh, wonderful stuff. And I'm going to use the resume button just to take me back to that. So I can grab that question, take me back to that spot and play. And it takes me back to that new spot right here and resume and resume and resume. And it's taking me back to that lovely position right here. I'm going to go ahead and take that breakpoint out because I don't need to see that again. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that conditional breakpoint. Yes, go ahead and delete it. I'm going to hit play again, take me back to that spot. So now I'm at demo ducks, and I'm now inside here. So demo ducks subindex, and my index right now is 0. And I'm going to assign current duck to that. So I had 20 answered questions. And so if I look at my questions inside there, I have 20 different questions inside that duck. So Miss Splash has a whole bunch of questions inside that she's answered. It's wonderful stuff. She's a smart little duck. And so I'm going to take that duck, I'm going to assign it to Debo ducks, excuse me, not Debo ducks. I'm going to assign that current duck to demo ducks subindex, and then I'm going to go ahead and step over that line. And now demo ducks has that current duck in it, right here, boom, we have our lovely Miss Splash with her 20 questions. I'm going to hit play, pause, or resume to go through that again to the next breakpoint. I'm going to go back to that point, and my current duck right here is Ms. Quackers, and Ms. Quackers has, looks like, oh, Miss Quackers has 33 questions. Oh, wow. She's quite a smart duck. We'll go ahead and help that out and hit play, pause again to skip past that. And we'll hit play, pause again. Boom, boom, boom. And as you can see, every time I do that, I go into my thing. It shows the change that's happening highlighted here in pink, so I can have that happen. And so this last duck that I just added, duck 4, has 38 answered questions. Wonderful stuff. Smart little duck that we've got there. And so those questions are now inside that. So I'm using the step into and step over to do that. So step into goes into that block of code and then waits. Step over does the line of code and then waits. And then resume goes until the next breakpoint. And then again, it waits for you to do that. The step return takes you out of there so you can do that. And you can see all those changes over here in the variables section. And so this is how we can go through and take a look at what's inside that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit resume again, and resume again. And again, I'm here at step 7. And as you can see, every time I do that, it steps through and gets to that point. And so that's wonderful. I'm going to take this breakpoint off right here. So I'm going to double click on it to remove the breakpoint. And I'm going to go over making sure I have that breakpoint again for the invalid update ducks array. And I've got my breakpoints right here. So now I just have the breakpoint line 119. It's my only breakpoint I've got right there now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit resume again. And it'll take me now to that next breakpoint. In this case is 119. So I hit play, pause. It goes through, executes the code. We've got that first little pop-up right here, starting questions for all ducks is 469. And I hit OK. And then it proceeds through the stack. And then I go to now my next point, 119. It does all the code that's inside my start method. I don't get to step into any of those pieces because I've told it just to skip and resume until that. So it does just the regular execution. And it waits now at line 119 where I've called that method. I'm now at source equals new debug duck array. So I go back to my variables window. I'm inside my method source. So inside this, I have my demo ducks array. And demo ducks is my data structure that is the data member. And as you can see, it's got 20 ducks in there. Lovely stuff. It's also sent as a parameter here, source. And so source right now is that same array of ducks. You can see the ID is 20, ID is 20. They're the same thing. But watch what happens when I reassign that data member to be a new value. So equals new debug duck array passing it 5. So I'm taking that data member and reassigning it. I'll step over. What? Its ID is now 450. And so that debug duck source demo ducks, the data member is still there inside the stack. It's still inside the heap itself as well. I've got that right here. I can go back and investigate it on the stack trace right there. But this local variable right here, I'm just creating that now as a local variable. You can go through my video on that as well, but I've just got nulls right there. I'm going to go ahead and step return, get out of this method because I don't really need to see what's going on. So I'm going to hit step return, which will take me out of this method and take me back to who called me. So step return. And then I come back to my method right here where it came from, invalid ducks array, and it takes me back to who called me and waits to go again until that next step. And now I've got my for debug duck inside demo ducks. I have my for each loop to go to answer questions. And if I step into this, it'll go into that loop. And again, I can step over that line and step over and step over. And I can step over and I can see how many times I'm hitting that updated count. As you can see, my incorrect answered questions count is going up over and over and over again. So I can step over that line and see what's happening with it. And I can go ahead and just step over that, and it waits every single time for each of those 20 ducks as I go through it. It'll keep adding all those lovely values. I can just add another breakpoint right here, so I can hit resume to go to that next spot. And now I have my invalid update right here. And I have my incorrect questions answered is still 469, matching the original 469 value from the total questions answered, because I didn't change anything, because that was an invalid update to my parameter. So we have that right here, and then I have my correct update dex array, so I can use that demonstration of how to properly do that. So I'll go ahead and step over that line. I'll step into that line right there. And we'll string builder, oh, this is code that I didn't write, so I don't want to be here. So I'm going to use step return to get out of this. So I step return takes me back out of there, because I don't need to learn how to build a string using a string invalid update. I was on the wrong line in my head. I wasn't watching where actually my breakpoint was. Oh dear. So step over that line right there. So my string original updated. And I step over that. I want to step into I want to step into update ducks array. So step into my method, which takes me to that. Oh, there's update ducks array inside my method. Wonderful stuff. And so my local count is set to 0. I'm going to go ahead and grab that information. So I'll step over that line, that line, that line, that line. Oh, my local count goes up by 1, 2. Oh, I'm updating my ducks questions. Wonderful stuff. And so I keep on doing this as I go through the 20 ducks inside my array, because I properly did not replace my duck array. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and 20. And now I've got all my local ducks have been updated. I'll update my string. I'm going to step over that. Don't want to step into it because it's not my code. And then boom, I have my view display message. I'll step over that. We'll call my line right here to bring a pop-up. There's my pop-up right there. Say OK. I'm now at the end of that method. Step over again, takes me out of there back to where I was called. So now I'm at the for each loop on this. I don't want to go through the for each loop again. So I'm just going to go ahead and go right here to this point and do a resume, which will take me to that spot right there. So I have my updated questions. You can see I had 20 more questions at 489 over 469. So I use that information to do that. And so I'd grab my valid update. I'd step over that because I don't want to step into the Java class information of how to build a string. We don't need to step that information. And my view.displayMessage, I can go into that one. I wrote view, so I can go into that if I step into it, taking my view class. And it's going to go, oh, I've got my string, so I step return out of that. Don't want to see that. I want to step into that next piece. Boom, step into again. Oh, back into string builder, don't want that. Step back out, return, step into, step return is still in string builder. I'm still building my string, then I'm going into that. So I just built that string right there. And so I've got that lovely thing. Step into again. Oh, I'm still in string builder. Step return. Step into again. String builder again. I'm finishing appending that value. Oh my gosh, step return out. Step into again. String builder, I'm still appending. Step out. Step into again. I'm still in string builder. Step into again. Display message. There's my method I wrote right there for display message. So it takes me into the display message, passing it the string, which calls the JavaScript pane. I definitely don't want to step into that because I didn't write that code. So I'm just going to go hit resume on that. Boom. Takes me back out of here. I have my lovely starting questions right here. My variables window is empty because I'm not with anything right now. I'm in my controller. I'm waiting right here after that step return. So I step over that next bit. I say OK. I'm at this point. My program is finished running. I don't have anything happening. My program is actually terminated, so I can't go into that. And so again, when we're doing this, we have our environment that we want to look through. When I'm done with the debug routine and go back to the Java perspective, it takes me back to the regular code method, and I can do that. So if I want to go back into the debug perspective, again, I just click on this debug perspective. I don't have to actually go into debug mode to start it. I can just go to the debug perspective. And the debug perspective, I have my breakpoints. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of breakpoints right there. And if I want to get rid of them, I can click on one at a time and use the X to get rid of it right here. Or I can use the double X to get rid of all of them all at once. Are you sure you want to move all breakpoints? Well, yes, I am. Take them all out and all the breakpoints are away. And now I don't have to worry about going to breakpoints any further. But I hope this is a helpful way of how you can use Java and debug to find what's going on and figure out what's happening inside your code. It's a great way to look deeper inside your project and understand it better. I hope this is helpful. Cheers. We'll see you next time and have a good day. Bye-bye.